Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to OLC4O, Term 1B. Today is November 28th, 2022. We are on class number 9. I'm your instructor, Mike Laverty. So we are still on Unit 1, but we are starting on Lesson 3 of Unit 1, and I'm hoping that we can finish off Lesson 3 and 4 this week and start on Unit 2 next week, because we have 9 weeks of courses. We have 4 units to work through. The first one is the longest one, so it takes the longest, but I also want to spend a lot of time preparing you for the final exam. So you do need to write a final exam in this course. And depending on your situation in your community, you may write a final exam or you may have one big assignment. But option 1 is the exam, and then if we can't make the exam work, then you'll have to write a large assignment. So some form of culminating activity. So today we're going to look at assignments 10 and 11 in Lesson 3. So we are in week 3 of classes. We've got about a month of classes until we have that holiday break. That's that's 2 weeks. 2 weeks of no live classes. So I'll be off work. You can obviously keep working on your assignments, but there'll be no classes during that time. Just going to move through this quickly. All this information is available on the course material. Can be available at your learning center by talking to your DEC or by contacting myself. So you can watch and listen live. I'm seeing lots of views on the YouTube channel, which is great. So keep on doing that. Search me up on YouTube. Look for Laverty Wassa. And look for the playlist. That's where you'll find all of the classes. So classes 1 through 8 are up, and you can watch them all at your own pace, and they will guide you through these assignments. You have many ways to submit your work. The traditional way of, just emailing it to me. And when you CC it to me, you kind of add my email address, which will be, I'll put that up in a second. But, you've got many ways to get your work. And WASA has many staff members available to help you do that, either in your community, at the Sula Code office, talking to your instructors directly. We'll help you through it. We'll find the best way for you to get your assignments to us. This is my number one way. This is the way I like to be reached. I like this email address right here. But you can also find me on Facebook. And if you just want to call and talk, you can phone these 2 numbers right here. That's the Sula Code number and the free long distance number. That's when you want to contact me. That's, of course, Central Standard Time. I do not take lunch breaks. I eat my lunch at my desk, so if I'm not teaching from 10 to 11, right? 10 to 11 on these 4 days, I'll be teaching. But outside of those times, give me a call. I'll be at my desk and ready to take your call. So here's your next steps. I want you to contact me. I'm hoping you've already read pages 1 through 35 and that you've started reading pages 36 to 46, which is Lesson 3 in Unit 1. And you should have completed assignments 1 through 7 by now. And you should start working on assignments 8 and 9 and start thinking about the assignments 10, 11, 12 in Lesson 3, which we will get into today. Okay, so today's lessons, we will do the words of the day, a headline. We're going to look at dashes and hyphens. We're going to look at conjunctions, and hopefully with enough time, we will look at 2 assignments, number 10 and number 11. So we're going to review the 9 parts of speech. We're going to learn the definition of this one, conjunction. We're going to learn about the proper use of dashes and hyphens. And we're going to look at the parts of a newspaper article, because that's what Lesson 3 is really all about. Here's your success criteria. So if you can understand the definition of this word, that's success number 1. Success number 2 is you can learn to use dashes and hyphens properly. And success criteria number 3, you will complete assignments 10 and 11 by learning the parts of a newspaper article. So if you can apply today's lesson and then go back and finish assignments 10 and 11, then you will be successful in today's lesson. So let's get into the words of the day. So I've got 3 photographs up there on the board. So we've got 3 famous Canadian runners. Okay, I'm sure most people could recognize the gentleman in the middle, Mr. Terry Fox. We also have Tom Longboat. And we've got, and this is Andre DeGrasse, the more recent of the runners. So our Anishinaabe word of the day is Giji Batu, which is a verb, which means she or he runs fast. The English equivalent, we've got sprint, to race or move at a full speed, especially for a short distance, as in running, rowing, etc. So I want to talk a little bit about synonyms. So a synonym is a word that has the same or nearly, it can mean exactly the same thing or almost the same meaning as another word in the language. They can be found in a thesaurus or by going to this excellent webpage, thesaurus.com. The words joyful and elated, for example, are synonyms of the word happy. They give a different meaning of the word happy, right? So they're not quite the same as happy, but they have a nearly the same. Like, to me, joyful and elated are sort of like more than happy, right? Like, you can be happy, and happy's being great, but like joyful and elated, these are like, you know, happy +1 or +2 or whatever. So many words in the language and the building blocks of words themselves are borrowed from the ancient Greek language. So it's really important to learn these ancient Greek words. A lot of the English language is Greek, it's Latin, it's got these old roots that go back thousands of years, but if you know them, it really helps you understand words. So syn, S-Y-N, that's a prefix. Remember, pre means before. So it comes before the word, or it's the first part of the word. And it literally means with or together. O-N-Y-M, or nim, that's a suffix. And a suffix comes after the word. It's the last part of the word. It means name or word. So a synonym literally means a together word. And the word synonym is actually 2 parts of that have been fused together. So it's a together word. Other words that end in that onim suffix, you may have heard these words, like a pseudonym, right? Pseudo means fake or almost, right? So a fake name. Crypto means mysterious or hidden. So a code or a secret name. A homonym, homo means same, right? So a word with the same spelling, pronunciation. Mono means one, so it's someone who goes by one name, like Eminem, the MC. That's a person who goes by one name. No middle name, no last name, one name. Antonym, ant usually means opposite, so it's got the opposite meaning. So synonym, same, antonym, opposite. Ethno, so the prefix ethno means people or culture, so an ethnonym is a name used for an ethnic group or people. An example of that would be Métis. That's an ethnonym. A toponym is a place for is a name for a place. And an allonym is a pen name used by an author, not their real name. So if we look at the language, the indigenous language, we've got some synonyms for he or she goes fast. So we've got Gijika, she or he goes fast, and then you see that Giji prefix at the start of the other 2 words, right? So he or she paddles fast, he or she thinks fast. So Anishinaabe is very similar to, Greek and English and hundreds of languages across the world in that it has prefixes, which are just words or parts of a word that you can put at the front of the word, and it changes the meaning of everything that comes after. So once you know that prefix, like once we know that this means fast, we can look at words like this word and kind of guess at their meaning. We need to know everything that comes after it. We need to know that that means paddling, and we need to know that this means thinking. But if we know the parts of a word, and if we start to recognize the prefixes and the suffixes, it'll give us a deeper understanding of the language and how it operates. These are some synonyms for run in the English language. So run is probably the most basic, obvious word you could use when I'm describing somebody running, okay? And the word run it's a fine word. It's a word we can use. It makes sense. But sometimes you want to use a synonym. Sometimes you want to go to a thesaurus and you want to find a better word, a more accurate word. What does it mean to dart, right? Or if you gallop, right? Usually an animal gallops, right? Like a horse or a dog maybe. But what does it mean when a human gallops, right? Or if you whisk, if you trot, right? If you if you're sprinting, if you're cantering, if you're racing, if you break, if you bound, if you spurt, amble, drop, jog. Just think of all these words you can choose from, right? When you're describing how somebody runs. So you always have lots of words to choose from, and I'll bring this back to the writing process. When we're writing and we're trying to get our ideas on the page, we will often use the most obvious word. We'll use words like run and is and was and just the most basic verbs we can think of. And then part of the editing process is to look at your individual word choices and be like, okay, I can take that verb and find a different one. And that's an opportunity for you to learn new words, see how they work, And then if you got extra time, or if you think you can do that, you can write a sentence 3 different ways and try different verbs, see how it changes the meaning of your words. So as a writer, you're always making choices. You have lots of choices to make, and the choices you make are going to change the meaning of your sentence. And it's like all things, any kind of creative activity, whether you're a sculptor, a musician, a dancer, or if you're like someone who builds homes or makes furniture or makes snowshoes or whatever, you're making tons of choices and you're making all kinds of decisions. And you can't do that unless you put the work in and you put the time in. And as we all know, when you put the time in and you make those choices, you make really cool stuff, right? So you just have to put the time in, be patient, try different things, experiment. Writing is experimenting, right? It's trying different things, seeing what works, see what doesn't. That's the way we do it. All right, so we're going to talk about a punctuation type today. So we're talking about the dash, sometimes called the M dash, but I would find it more commonly just called the dash. So it's one of the lesser used punctuation marks, but it's important to understand what it is. So it's a punctuation mark, and it sets off ideas. And a dash, it's similar. It's similar to brackets and commas. It does a similar function. But it's a little less dramatic or theatrical than using brackets. It's a little more, it's not as abrupt. It's not as kind of as like a sharp break from what you're talking about. So, and here's a little technical note. So when you're typing on a computer, what you do is you type the word, you hit the hyphen twice, and then you type the next word, and the computer will put in the dash. It's one of those weird ones, like there's no dash button on a keyboard. You have to do like a special combination, but usually when you put the double hyphen, the computer knows it. When you're writing with a pen and a pad, you're going to want to do like that. Like the hyphen is the short one, and the dash is the long one. So a dash is a double hyphen. It's twice as long as a hyphen. So here's how they work. So Aaron Mendez brought some unique bragging rights when he resumed school this fall in Mississauga. He is the top chess player under the age of 11 in the world. So we talked about this last week when we add additional information. So we could put this stuff in brackets, but in this case, the writer chose to put a dash in there. So you can write a sentence about something or someone. In this case, we're talking about this young chess prodigy, Aaron Mendez. And so we want to add some additional information. It's actually some pretty important information. The fact that this kid is the top chess player under the age of 11 in the world. So the dash right here, it adds an additional thought after the sentence, right? He is afraid of two things, spiders and his wife. So same thing. We could we could put a colon here, right? So we could do that because remember the colon is a way to introduce ideas or lists. So you could use, these are interchangeable in this case. And then the third example is, upon discovering the errors, all 124 of them, the publisher immediately recalled the books. And this is a case where we could use brackets or we could use the dash. So that's a positive thing about being a writer, is you have lots of tools at your disposal. And there's ways you can use the tools incorrectly, but some tools can be used in multiple ways. So, and that's where it gets a bit confusing when you're first starting out. A lot of people, they want things to be right or wrong. But in English, sometimes there is no one right way of doing it. There's like 3 or 4 different ways of doing it, and you as a writer get to choose which of the 4 ways you want to do it. So for people who want right and wrong answers, like math, it doesn't really work that way. Like not putting a punctuation mark at the end of your sentence, that's wrong every time, right? So there are rules like that, right? Not capitalizing the first word of your sentence, that's always going to be wrong. Unless you're writing poetry or something a little more out there and creative. But in typical everyday writing, if you don't put a period and you don't capitalize your first word, that's wrong every time. But there are areas where it's debatable, and as a writer, you can choose what to do. So we use hyphens to join parts of words. So load-bearing wall, rock-hard concrete, dog-friendly park, state-of-the-art, one-of-a-kind, mother-in-law. So we use the hyphen, which again is like, the hyphen's the small one. The dash is the long one. So the hyphen, it joins 2 words together. We also use hyphens like with a prefix like ex, so my ex-wife, the ex-chief of a community, the ex-mayor of my town, an ex-CEO. We use it when we spell out fractions like 1/3, 21, or numbers, 88, 2/5, right? We use it when using words like high or low, like a high-octane fuel, a low-flying drone, low-fat yogurt, a high-interest savings account, right? So the hyphen fuses the 2 words together. And sometimes words are spelled with a hyphen, and then over time, they sort of just, the hyphen goes away, and they go together. Like email is a good example, right? So we used to call it electronic mail. That's what it was initially called. And then somebody said, that's too long. Let's just call it email. E, which stands for electric, hyphen, mail. And then now, because email is so common, you usually see email spelled like this. And now the word email is one word. But, and that's why it's good to look in a dictionary if you're unsure on these things. But that's typically how that works. Now, of course, it's English, so there's going to be an exception to the rule. And if the noun comes first, we usually leave the hyphen out. So the hyphen is there so we don't get mixed up, right? So if we say this wall is load bearing, we don't put the hyphen in there because we know that load bearing applies to this wall. But if it was written the other way, bearing and wall could be confused together. Hard and concrete, friendly park, right? So usually, if the thing that the words describe come before, you put the hyphen in. But if the descriptors, remember these are adjectives, right? If the adjective comes before, you add the hyphen. If the adjective comes after, then you typically don't add the hyphen. And this is like, this is pretty advanced stuff, right? So I mean, most teachers aren't gonna, they're not gonna mark you incorrectly for using a hyphen, but I think it's important to learn how to use it correctly, right? So, and it's typically when you have two adjectives like that, and they're very connected, right? So you put that hyphen in there. In that last example, state of the art, when you have multiple words, like if you've got 3 or 4 words being fused together, like state of the art, mother-in-law, father-in-law, those stay hyphenated because they're sort of seen as like one idea or one word. Okay, we'll look at today's headline. So this was posted on Facebook by one of a student I have in a different class. This guy right here, this Ronald Fox, thought that was kind of cool. So he was featured in a CBC. This is from CBC. CBC News. This was an online article. And it says, Ontario announces $1.5 million investment for skilled trades training. So there it is right there with our nouns in blue, verbs in green, prepositions in red, adjectives in orange. Then we'll break that down, okay? So Ontario is a noun. It's a proper noun. Ontario is also the subject of my sentence. Always good to review that. So Ontario is the subject of my sentence. And the predicate of my sentence is everything that comes later. So remember, the subject is what the sentence is about, the most important thing. And the predicate is what is said about it, okay? So this is what they did. They announced $1.5 million, a $1.5 million investment. So we can treat these two together as a noun phrase, or we could say that 1.5 million is an adjective. It tells us what kind of investment they made for skilled trades training, right? So again, the words skilled and trades are modifying the word noun. Now, sometimes when you write a newspaper headline, newspaper headlines are one of the few examples where the writer can get away with stuff, and they don't typically have to follow pure 100% grammar. A newspaper headline is really short because it has to go at the start of the article. It's usually printed in a really big font, and newspaper headlines are sort of like shortened English, and they get away with stuff. So if we were writing this in a complete sentence, we would probably have to put the period at the end, and I would argue that skilled trades should probably be, it would be hyphenated, right? It'd be written like skilled hyphen trades, right? That's how we would write that. So in a headline, you can get away with it, but if we were writing this in a paper, I think it would be skilled hyphen trades. Okay. So today's today's part of speech is the conjunction, and we've talked about these before. They're linking words. They link words, phrases, other clauses together, and they let us avoid choppy sentences, but we must use them correctly to do so. So it's really important to think about why we have these rules and conventions. So sometimes it might seem unnecessary, like it's like, why do we have all these rules in English? Wouldn't it be easier if we didn't have so many rules? But all of these rules were invented or developed by speakers of the language for a specific reason. And sometimes it gets messy, and sometimes the rule seems a bit silly, but conjunctions were invented because it helps us connect ideas, and if we didn't have conjunctions, we would have really choppy writing. Okay, so conjunctions are very useful in that they let us make more fluid sentences. We want our writing to flow. We don't want our writing to be choppy. We want our writing to flow and to just kind of flow off the page, so that's why we have them. The most common ones are the coordinating conjunctions. It's a nice little mnemonic device you can use here called fanboys. I'm not sure if you've heard that word before. Mnemonic. A mnemonic device. Pneuma, which is like mind or memory. So it's a mind or a memory device. Helps you remember stuff. So fanboys, right? F-A-N-B-O-Y and S. Those are the coordinating conjunctions. We have the correlative conjunctions, and these always come in pairs, right? Always in a pair. Not only this, but also that. Neither this, but neither that nor this. Either that or this. Both us and you, right? They always come in a pair. And then we have the subordinating conjunctions, which I won't have time to go through today, but those are the three main categories you have of a conjunction. So the correlative ones, they always come in pairs. So you can either call me at home tonight or wait until tomorrow morning. Not only do I have a phone for sale, but I also have the case and charger available. We will order both the large pizza and the hot wings. So you could say, we will order the large pizza. We will order the hot wings, right? It's very choppy and repetitive. I have a phone for sale. I also have a charger and case for sale. So it helps you avoid repetition, and it also helps you avoid choppy sentences, right? So and then when you use the fanboys, the conjunctions that, for, and, nor, but, or, yet, or so, you always add the comma. See the commas here? You always add the commas. But it changes the meaning of the sentence depending on which one you choose. You left the door open, and the dog ran away. You left the door open, so the dog ran away. You left the door open, yet the dog ran away. It changes the meaning. In the first one, it's like, you did this, and that happened. There's no really immediate connection. But if I say, you left the door open, so the dog ran away, the word so means because, and that's like I'm blaming you. It's your fault the dog ran away. The second example, the exam was difficult, yet many students passed. The exam was difficult, and many students passed. So the word and is kind of neutral. It's like this happened, and then that happened. Not necessarily connected. In the first one, the exam was difficult, yet many students passed. That's kind of like a little mini story. It was really hard, but the students, they still passed. The exam was difficult, so many students passed. And that one's kind of weird because it's like they passed because it was difficult, but that might be true. Most people in my family work in healthcare, whereas I decided to go into education. So that's a different conjunction, whereas operates the same as but. This is this is kind of informal. This is more of a formal word. I don't really use the word whereas when I'm talking to my friends or family, but I might use it in my writing, especially if I'm trying to sound smart or trying to convince people of something. I need an umbrella because it is raining. So conjunctions are sort of like prepositions, and a lot of conjunctions are prepositions depending on how they're used, but they do show a relationship between things, right? They show a logical connection between two ideas or two words. Okay, moving right along. We're into the unit. Okay, so we're talking about Unit 1, Lesson 3. What do people read? 10 marks, okay? This is a pretty easy 10 marks because you're only asked here to, in part 1. In part 1, you're just simply listing stuff. So again, there's as long as you're talking about things that have written words involved, it's reading. So what do people read during your time in high school? And so think about that. So think about, write down some things you're kind of forced to read. What's your required reading in high school, and some other things that you and other people like to read. Give some examples. Be specific as you can, right? So if you say magazines, say what kind. Oh, it's always best to be specific. If you're talking about a novel, name it. If you're talking about lyrics, name the song. I might look it up, Give me a song, give me an artist, I'll look it up. If there are written words involved, it's reading, okay? So things we read, that's really easy to do, right? So you just list, you just got to start listing stuff, right? So people read novels. For Whom the Bell Tolls, one of my favorite novels. It's also one of my favorite Metallica songs, but they got it from the novel by Ernest Hemingway, right? So we read novels, we read websites. I read NHL.com a lot. What else do we read? We read song lyrics. On this past weekend, I went to my friend's house, and we were playing some Blink-182 songs. So we read song lyrics, we read websites. In high school, we read short stories. My favorite writer is a guy from Argentina, and his name is Jorge Luis Borges. I love that guy. In high school, we're often forced to read plays. We're forced to read Othello, for example. I did Othello in grade 10, right? So that's it. You're just listing things that we read. And if you can, give me an example. Tell me what you read, right? Sometimes you read, I'm trying to get myself in better shape, and I'm trying to eat better, right? So a list of ingredients on a cereal box, right? That's reading. All right, so that's what we read, right? So that's part 1. Okay, part 2 of the assignment is what do people read, part 2. So we have one paragraph, and this is really important, okay? So you will lose marks. Unfortunately, I have to do this if you don't write at least 5 sentences. You have to do that, right? So be careful when you read through the assignment guidelines. So anytime you're approaching an assignment, or if you're writing an exam, if you're writing a test, it's always best just to take a deep breath and just read the assignment and just take it in and say, okay, what is being asked of me here? Because sometimes you just rush into it and you miss some really key stuff. So, what is really being asked of me in this situation? That's why I've broken it down for you. You're being asked to write one paragraph of at least 5 sentences, and so that's going to be about 50 to 100 words. And you can do the math. So that's about, a 10-word sentence to a 20-word sentence, right? Whereas most sentences you write are going to be about 10 words to about 20 words long. Times that by 5, you're looking at 50 to 100 words, okay? So count them out with a pen and a pad. Go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Or if you've got that word processor, if you're using Google Docs, if you're using Word, go to the review feature, go to your tools, look for word count, see how many words you've got. If you've got 20 words, you have not come anywhere close to doing it. If you've got 180 words, that's fine, right? But we're looking for that 50 to 100 word range here. You've got to comment on the types of reading that you do away from school. Do you like reading? And if so, why? So this is like, we're talking about reading you like, right? This is the important part, right? And we're just talking about it in 5 sentences. You could talk about one kind of reading. That's why it says type or types. So pick one kind of reading or pick 2 or 3 and write about it in 1 paragraph. So let's just do that now, right? So, let's talk about the writing process. Step 1, we plan. In step 1, you should pick 1 or 2. It's 1 paragraph. You want to focus your writing, right? So pick 1 or 2 types of reading. Okay? Okay, good. Step 2, we write. And as always, I would do a free write session. So free write for, at least five minutes. And then I'm going to put a note here. Try to be specific. Okay? So some of the reading that I love to do is nonfiction writing. I've mentioned it a few times in this class. I love reading about the brain and reading about psychology. So I would write about that, and I might talk about that. I might talk about listening to audiobooks, which is something I do a lot too. So free write for at least 5 minutes. Step 3, you're gonna revise it. So try to find a theme / main idea that will become your topic sentence, okay? All right, so you're going to step 1, we're going to plan that out. We're going to pick 1 or 2 types of reading and try to be specific. Step 2, we're going to write. So we're going to do a free writing session. We're going to set a timer for 5 minutes and write as much stuff as we can about those subjects, not worrying about making sense. We're not worrying about spelling or grammar, parts of speech. We don't care about any of that stuff. We're just writing. Step 3, we go back and we say, okay, what's the theme? What's the main idea? What am I talking about here? And that's going to become your topic sentence, okay? And then I would suggest kind of going back to step 2, and then you could write a you could write yourself a topic sentence, okay? So once you've done that, that's the way I would approach this. Is I would, once I have my step 2, my free write done, and once I've kind of got a main thing, then I would go back to step 2, and I would try to write a good opening / topic sentence, right, for your paragraph. And then you're going to write your supporting sentences. And our supporting sentences are going to back up this main idea. And then we're going to write a good concluding sentence, okay? So, sentence 1 is my opening sentence. I'm going to have sentences 2, 3, and 4. And then sentence 5 is going to be my concluding sentence, right? That's the pattern. It's a good pattern. Use it. A really good opening sentence that talks about the topic. 2, 3, and 4 support that idea. They give evidence for it. So I enjoy listening to audiobooks about the brain. Here's 1 or 2 examples, and then a concluding sentence. I read these books because I enjoy learning about the brain, and it helps me do whatever, right? But that's going to be your pattern, okay? So give me a strong opening sentence, back up your main idea, wrap it up, boom, you got a good paragraph. All right. For the next 10 minutes, we'll jump into the next assignment, okay? So we're talking about newspaper articles, okay? And newspaper articles are written using the inverted pyramid writing. Now, looking at the top of the pyramid, it's the biggest chunk of the pyramid, okay? And the biggest chunk of the pyramid is the headline, the lead paragraph, and parts of the explanation, right? The second biggest chunk is the additional information, right? So the additional information right here. And then the bottom chunk here is like, it'd be nice if you had it, you know, and that's kind of goes in this category, right? So it's point first writing. It's you've written 1,000 words, but if somebody only reads the first 100, that's okay because you've front loaded it. You've put the most important stuff at the start. And that's how we write a newspaper article, and that's how we read it. We expect the most important stuff to be at the start of it and the least important stuff to be at the bottom, right? That's the inverted program, right? So you could stop reading here, but you shouldn't stop reading here if you want to make sense of the whole thing. So let's break down the anatomy of a newspaper article. We have a headline, a short, attention-grabbing statement about the event or story. We've talked a lot about headlines in this course. I've given you many examples. The byline is who wrote the story. So if you're a writer and you're a journalist and you're trying to get your name out there, you want to get that byline. You want to have it written by me. You want to have that. You want to make a name for yourself. The lead paragraph is the first one, and it should tell us the who, what, when, where, how, and why. Right? That's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 W's and the 1 H. 5 W's, 1 H. The explanation is the other important details the reader needs to know. This might include direct quotes. So you have what happened, what's the main idea, and then we're gonna go into some backstory or some explanation, and then we're gonna have some additional information which may reference a different story, and it's gonna have lesser details. So if you don't have those details, you can still understand the story and you still get the message, but it's nice to know, right? So that's the phrasing they use. It's nice to have it. If you don't have it, not a big deal, but if you do have it, helps you understand the story a little better. We have a photo, which is of course a photograph. Not all articles have a photograph, but some of them do. And most articles, if a photograph is included, there's going to be a caption. And the caption is a very short description of the photo, usually printed directly beneath the photo. Right? So that's the anatomy of the newspaper article. Okay, so who, that is who's involved. Person, a group, a building. So who can be a thing, right? So who usually refers to people, but who can also be things and organizations and objects and things like that. What is the action that took place or the action that will take place? What is happening? So it's the what of an article is like, who is the subject, the most important thing? What is sort of like the predicate? What is said about that thing? What did they do? What will be done to them? When, very obviously, is when it happened or when it will happen. Okay? It's going to tell you, a lot of newspaper articles are talking about stuff that's already happened. They're reporting on an event. But some newspaper articles are sort of like looking ahead to something. Or they're covering something that's ongoing. Like it's an ongoing situation that they're just reporting on. Where it happens, right? Where it's taking place. Why is why it's taking place. And how is the manner in which it takes place. So how did the event happen? So how something happened is neutral. Why something took place, that's not neutral, okay? And that's where the bias is going to come in, okay? So that's a very important word, right? So when you're reading a newspaper article, somebody's bias is going to come in. So when you're a journalist and when you're writing a newspaper article, depending on what kind of article it is, but if it's in a newspaper and it's the news, technically you're just supposed to talk about what happened. So this event happened. Here's why it happened, right? So the why is sometimes not included in a newspaper article. If someone's expressing their opinion and it's an opinion piece, then the why is going to be in there. But like, for example, like, if you have like an accident where somebody dies, like the initial reporting probably is not going to go into the why it happened. It's just going to tell you that it did happen. And then maybe if like they investigate the incident and they find out why the person died, then you might get the why in there. But depending on the nature of the release, they may not go into the why, because the why sometimes it asks for someone to supply an opinion on something, and it's no longer neutral. They're sort of making guesses about why something happened. But if the why of the question is like not debatable, and it's like sometimes the why can be neutral, but so sometimes it's not neutral. There could be some bias there, but like if you've got like a skate park being built and a bunch of the people are doing a fundraiser, like a party to raise money, well, they're doing this event because they need money, and that's the why of it. But sometimes the why can be a little bit tricky. And we're talking about purpose, okay? So an author may have many purposes in mind when they write and publish a text. In most cases, the text will have a primary purpose. Primary means one, most important, and it's more important than the others, okay? So the primary purpose will be to persuade, inform, or entertain. So when we write, we have a primary purpose in mind. And we might have secondary purposes. Like, for example, I can tell you a funny story, and my number one objective is to entertain you, right? And maybe that funny story is about like an animal, and it's based on like real animal behavior. So when I tell you that story, you might learn some stuff about the animal, but most importantly, my intention, my purpose was to make you laugh, and that's to entertain you. And so we have the PIE acronym, right? P-I-E. When we persuade, we're expressing an opinion and trying to convince the reader that what they're saying is true. So if I'm persuading you, I'm presenting you evidence, but I'm trying to make you think a certain way. I'm trying to convince you that I'm right, that what I'm saying is true. So most newspaper articles are not persuasion, right? That's not the primary purpose. A newspaper article is usually informing. You're sharing statistics, details, examples, descriptions, etc. You're trying to convey information. That's when you're being neutral, right? So, this is not neutral. You're taking a side, right? That's when you're taking a side. And then when you inform, it should be neutral. And as much as possible, you're not taking sides. You're just presenting information, ideally. Sometimes that's hard to do. And then to entertain is when you're trying to make the audience feel something. You're trying to make them laugh or experience an emotion, right? So entertainment is about emotion, right? When we're entertained, we become scared, we become sad, or we become happy, or we laugh. It's really feeling based, right? So it's not about presenting information. It's not really about making an argument. It's just about making people feel something and making them laugh. Okay, so that's entertainment. And then we have examples of that, like an opinion piece, an op-ed, a politician, somebody doing a very controversial Facebook post. Those are persuasion pieces. An essay about the writing process in a textbook, the Wikipedia page about Mount Everest, a book about Louis Riel. Entertainment could be a funny anecdote about growing up, a ghost story, right? Those are entertainment, so those are the examples, right? So we don't have time because we've got to wrap things up for today, but when we come back tomorrow morning, we will jump into assignment 11, and we'll start to break down the news report found in your unit, and we'll start talking about the audience, the purpose, and we'll start talking about the who, what, when, where, why, and how. So thanks for tuning in today, and we'll jump back on this tomorrow.